How you do? We're back. So I haven't done a block collection since, well, I haven't done a full block collection since February because I ran out of blocks. So my papa made me 15 new ones, not 50 like last time. So it's going to be much more manageable. Probably wondering, Mackenzie, what is this collection going to be? And I'll tell you, my next collection is going to be called the Roses and Ruins collection. So as you can see here, I sketched this out in May. It was May 14th. It actually might be 19th, but I'm pretty sure it was May 14th, 2022. So this has kind of been in the works and kind of in the back of my mind as a plan of something I want to do for over a year now. And it's a collection concept that I'm really excited about. So it's exactly what it sounds like, Roses and Ruins. And the ruins will be Greek architecture, statues, pillars, and they're going to be broken down, they're going to be decayed, and they'll be surrounded by overgrown rose bushes. And maybe even the roses that grow on vines as well. I want to play around with that. And so I sketched out 7 different blocks for this. So this collection will be 7 pieces, not 6. I was planning on making them 6, but then I just looked them over and I remembered why I had 7, because I really love all of these designs just looking at them. But the 7th one I might actually scrap. It might be the only one I'm okay with scrapping, but we'll see when we get there. So this collection is going to have a very cold blue toned color palette, almost kind of moody in a sense. And the roses will be whites, reds, pinks. So I'm going to be using these greens. They all have blue undertones. It started out with blue undertone red, but like an orangey red, and then I just kept adding more and more orange to it and a little bit of white for these two. This is just strictly blue. Goes to gray as I started adding white. So I think I like the way that looks with the bluish greens and the bluish grays and the dark blues with the orange. I think I like that. But I also really like this too, with it all being the same with blue undertones. Do you see the difference? I really like that too. I might have pops of this orange in there, here and there, but I think it is mostly gonna be blues. I initially played around with the idea of doing these on paper. In fact, in my notes, I made a specific note about that. It might be better to do them on that format so that I can actually scan and print them much easier. I'm gonna make them out of blocks first, and then I'll worry about the prints later. I'm gonna be getting started on painting today, like painting the actual images. I don't know how much I'm gonna get done today. As you can see, I'm in the basement. That's where I chose to do this and to film it. I thought it would be a good idea because then it's quiet down here and I can just kind of like film freely. It gets pretty dark down here in the basement for like 90% of the day. There's like very little light that comes in from the tiny windows, and so I have to use mostly like indoor lighting, and that creates a very orangey sort of tone and changes the colors a lot. And I've talked about this in previous videos, so I won't delve too much into that because I've gone over it extensively at least twice by now. But that's the only thing I'm worried about with this project. And I don't know about this, if this will work or not, but I was thinking that maybe what I'll do is I'll bring my paints and my sketchbook upstairs and I'll paint like a palette of the colors that I want this collection to be mostly made up of, just the base colors. And then that way I'll have something to actually reference while I'm painting, so I can compare the colors I'm using and that I'm creating to the colors that I know are correct. And then that way maybe I can prevent it from being a surprise when I bring them upstairs into the light to take pictures and they look entirely different, because sometimes that can be a good thing, but sometimes that can be like catastrophic depending on how much of a difference it makes. I love this one already. I actually kind of love it just as it is. Sometimes I like the way they look without all the tiny details and stuff when they're just in the stage. Sometimes that can look really lovely too. So today is October 7th and I have made no progress because I don't even know. I just like really don't want to paint. But it's like I really do. Like I really want to paint, but I can't bring myself to do it. It's been a nightmare. But today we're gonna continue working on block number 1. I'm not sure I'm feeling this blue color. It almost feels like too dark, I think. I might have to lighten it up a little because I don't know, it just feels too dark. Today is the Thanksgiving weekend, so I have plans this evening, so I can't spend all day painting. I have like a bunch of other things to do before I leave, so I'm just probably gonna paint for maybe 2 hours today, and we'll see how much we can get done on this one. I do think that adjusting the background and adding the clouds was a good choice. I think this would have been too plain and too boring otherwise. I think it really added more of an element to it that's just so nice. I like that I did that. That was a good choice on my part. Once I had the stonework done and felt sort of comfortable with the way that it looked, it's not perfect because, well, I'm not like a perfect like photorealism kind of artist. At least I can be if I'm looking at an image and I'm copying it directly, but when I'm looking at multiple different references and having to try to kind of make something out of that, not so much. There's just a muscle I haven't flexed as much, worked on as much, but this I think looks good. Like I'm happy with the way that it looks. I'm ready to move on to the roses and such, but before I did that, I wanted to head upstairs and see what the colors look like in proper daylight and not just in the basement. It's going to rain quite a few days this week, and on the days it's not raining, it's going to be cloudy most of, if not the whole day. So I mean, I'm working with lower light even upstairs, trying to see how the colors look, but it's still better than the basement lighting. It's still going to make a difference. So I'm headed upstairs, and as you can see, this is another reason why I'm not working upstairs right now, because our new dog, Little Bear, as I call her, is an absolute menace to society, and especially my toes. She just is in that like nipping, biting, sort of chewing phase because her teeth are coming in, and she just wants to eat the shit out of me. And so it's really difficult to get anything done when she's nipping at my feet. But as you can see, the colors actually, surprisingly enough, they look pretty much the same as they did in the basement. Like it's not too big of a difference that I feel like I have to be cautious or that I have to make any changes at this stage. So I was really happy with that. So we're gonna go ahead and move forward with the rest of the painting, which is the roses and the vines and sort of the overgrown foliage. So we're at about, I would say like 90% done with this one. I'm just gonna need some shadows to finish it off. But I'm gonna stop here for today, and I will come back around to this closer to the end. I'll probably do all the shadowing, sort of like a shadow wash, kind of all at once at the end. But for now, we're gonna set this one aside. When I sit down and paint tomorrow, I'm going to be working on blocks 2 and 3. They're very similar in terms of palette and sort of general concept. So I took a little bit of a break. Well, not a little bit. It was a long one. Yesterday, I sat down and I did a lot of the background. Now, the roses are, I don't know how I feel about them. I was really struggling with the colors. A lot of the pink I was making was just a very, like almost a Barbie pink, to the extent that it wasn't realistic looking, just kind of cheesy. Do you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't look like real roses. Even though roses can be a bright pink, I wanted it to be more like, maybe a little more muted. I got it to a point where I felt satisfied enough with it, but I will definitely be adding like a really light, almost white sort of pink for the highlights for the ones that are more in the foreground, where the light is catching them more. And then the same thing with the red roses. I knew I wanted these ones to be red, but the problem is, and this is something I believe I talked about in the winter 2022 collection video, I talked about this with the houses, that the problem with my red, orange, and yellow paints of this brand is that they're not very opaque at all. It takes like 500,000 coats. And the problem that I was having with the red as well was trying to get the color to look good with like the blues. I actually couldn't even match the color that I created on my palette. I don't know, I kept getting a more magenta color with the red and then a little bit of the blue than I was getting the color that's on the paper. I'm thinking there might be some brown in there as well, and that's why it looks like such a vintage sort of muted red, whereas like the color I was creating on my palette was just continuously more like magenta almost. I think it's still fine, like the way that the color looks currently is okay. I'm just wondering how I'm gonna do those highlights. I think I'll have to put white first for the full details of the roses, and then go over it with the exact red shade that I want in order to get that brighter red color without having to add white to it and it becoming pink. But I got both of those blocks, both block 2 and 3, to a place where I was sort of satisfied with them. I can deal with the roses again later, but I wanted to move on today to the statues, which are the main event. And so I started with block number 2, spent about 3 hours painting that, and then after dinner I moved on to block number 3, spent about an hour or so on that one in order to get it to kind of a similar level of completion. To start with, I'm pretty much doing them exactly as how they're pictured, almost like as if they're pristine in a sense. I think that's kind of a good place to start, and then I'm gonna go back in and I will be breaking them down, sort of deciding what areas are gonna be chipped, sort of creating that distressed sort of look, adding some cracks in there. Of course, this is the Roses and Ruins collection, so they need to look like ruins. A lot of these statues that I'm using as reference images for this project are real statues in like actual places, and so I think people who are familiar with those will recognize them, and I'm fine with that. Like, I'm taking something that exists in the real world and I'm putting it in a different state than how it actually exists in real life. Does that make sense? I think that's kind of a good way of thinking about it. But I do think that, and I was thinking this while I was working today, for the next section of this collection, like this one, it was one thing to kind of use real statues and Greek architecture as the base for this, but I think I want to really explore creating completely new statues. I actually have so many ideas, and you'll see because I'll do a video on that one too, but the next Roses and Ruins collection will be done very differently. It's going to be much more from like scratch, and I'll be kind of creating completely new scenes with statues that don't actually exist in real life is what I'm trying to say. And I'm really, really excited about it because I actually think I'll be able to really get my creative juices flowing in a different way. It's kind of like I'm almost so excited. I want to stop working on this version of the collection and dive right into that one. I'm having to like tell my brain that no, we're not doing that. We are finishing this, and then I will probably start with that one immediately. I think the part that I'm like kind of struggling with right now is the fact that I really love the way that they look when they're like normal. I don't really want to distress them, but I think it's important to do so in order to keep with the theme of what I was trying to do with this collection. So I'm trying to be very selective. It's just like the angel wings and such. I love the way that they look. I love the way, like, just painting them was so much fun. Easily probably my favorite part. I really like painting in the folds of fabric and stuff as well, even though sometimes that can be very frustrating, is one of the most satisfying things for me to paint. But the angel wings have really taken the cake for me with this one. They were so much fun to do, and there's just something about the shape of them that's really just so beautiful to look at and very fascinating. I think bird wings, and especially on a person's body, there's just something about that visual of wings on a human that is just so fascinating. And actually, wings on any animal that shouldn't have them, now that I think about it, like whether it's like horses with wings or cats with wings, it's just an amazing combo. It's just so good to look at. Painting wings has been really fun for me, so I don't really want to break the wings down because I want them the way that they are, but I also feel like when thinking about statues and what tends to break down over time or what tends to get chipped or broken, it's usually the wings. Sometimes I doubt myself and sometimes I feel bad about my art ability or the areas where I feel like I'm not good enough. But the one thing that I have full confidence in that no one can ever take from me is faces. I'm very good at faces, and the smaller, the better. Because I'm really good at tiny faces, especially tiny faces. Very tiny faces. Oh my gosh. I kind of look like Professor Trelawney. So today, we're getting to work on blocks 4 and 5 so that they're caught up with the others. And then I'll go back through and start decaying all of the statues and adding that overgrown greenery all at once. By the second go at this type of background with block 3, I started getting the hang of how best to do the greenery, and I feel like every block just gets better and better in terms of how the leaves and roses were done. 4 and 5 benefited from this as their backgrounds are further back and therefore have smaller details, so being well practiced at painting in the leaves and roses made this much easier, and they looked much better than they probably would have had I done them first. For those wondering, I painted the background a dark blackish blue-green and then added batches of leaves with a dark blue-green, mostly just loosely jotting in their shapes and making sure they were spread out and leaving some room for the black to peek through. I then layered another batch of leaves in a mid-green blue and then finally a lighter green blue, making less leaves each time. This helps create depth and makes the background more visually interesting. With previous block collections, I occasionally had issues with the light bouncing off the block and making it difficult to see what I was doing when filming from certain camera angles, but for this video, I unfortunately experienced that with most of what I filmed. Pair that with my phone not being great at filming in non-natural light, and you've got some of the shittiest footage I could have gotten for this, so I am very sorry about that. It's funny because the lighting in the basement wasn't bad at all in person, so I figured it would look fine on camera too, but here we are. I don't know if it's the acrylic paint itself or if it's just because it's on wood, but the light bounces off really bad no matter what, sometimes even making it difficult for even me to see what I'm doing while I'm doing it. So these block pieces are difficult to film in any lighting situation anyway, but I was pretty disappointed in the footage for this particular video, more so than past ones. I'll have to see if I can figure out a better filming strategy for my next block collection. Honestly, I'm obsessed. The stonework for block 5 was so difficult. I ended up changing and redoing the top details of the pillars at least twice or 3 times each, which added a few hours of extra work onto my plate. It was important to get the details right and have everything looking properly proportioned and all the angles visually making sense, since these are likely to catch people's attention pretty much right away. I love doing tiny details like this, especially the tiny highlights, but it was very frustrating to do them several times after realizing they weren't quite right or were in the wrong spot or whatever. There's not a single block painting collection I've ever done where this didn't happen with at least 1 or 2 of them, so the curse continues. I got the pillared structure done today. This, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I can't figure anything out with this, but I'm gonna come back to it tomorrow. I spent quite a few hours on this today, I think about 4, doing these pillars in this. So, we're getting there.
2 days later.
This took 500 years. But I finally have it at a point where I think I'm happy with it. It's gonna get all broken down and stuff anyway, so it doesn't have to be perfect, but I wanted it to at least be properly proportioned to everything else. So now that that's done, we're gonna get into the distressing of the stonework and the overgrowth of the roses and vines. It was a little painful to mess up a lot of the work I put into the details by distressing the stone, but they wouldn't be proper ruins without wear and tear, so I bit the bullet and got to adding cracks and chips and blotting in dark stains with my finger. I also brought back the flick and tap method I shared in videos before, like my autumn collection from last year, which helps make the stone and concrete look more realistic in my opinion. I used mostly dark shades of blue and black tones for the wear and tear process. The next stage was overgrowth. So I started with adding moss to the statues and various shades of brownish green with slate blue undertones from darkest to lightest, patting it on the blocks with my brush and then using my finger to blend it out a little. I went a little heavy-handed with the second block, and I think it made the angel statue blend in a little too much with the background, but I think I actually kind of like that about it. When you look up pictures of statues that are ruins, they've been around for a long time, they're decaying, they're almost always covered in an insane amount of moss, and if there's a lot of greenery around them, they do blend in. And so they become almost one with the greenery around them, and it is sort of hard to differentiate the statues from everything else. I think I might have overdone it. Does this seem like too much? No, right? Like it seems okay? I don't know. So yes, maybe in real life that would be the case, that the angel statue would be so covered in moss that she blends in with the rest of the greenery around her and becomes hard to see. But if she can't be seen by the viewer, then they're not going to know what they're looking at. So you kind of have to strike a balance between what is natural in real life and what looks realistic, and what is aesthetically pleasing and visually makes sense. I hope that makes sense, what I'm trying to express. But I think I was kind of towing the line a little bit here. She's not entirely invisible, so it's fine, but it does take you a couple of seconds of looking at it, I think, for your brain to process what it is you're looking at and to actually see her. And I think that that might appeal to some people who like that kind of thing, so I decided to leave it as is for now. It was around this point, though, that I was starting to doubt the idea in my head was going to actually translate well onto these blocks, or at least the way I was going about it. I was worried it would actually just look messy and unclear as to what it was a painting of, but I kept going and added the overgrown roses to all of the statues. I got to work on block 6 as well, and although I did sketch out and prep block 7, I did indeed end up scrapping it for time reasons. I was going out of town for a week the next day and needed to make sure these blocks were done before I left, as I had other things to work on next when I got back. This collection works just fine as a 6-piece set, so I'm not too bummed out about it. That block can be repurposed in my next collection instead. Block 6 has a bit of sky showing to tie it in with block 1 and give a little more visual variety to the collection as a whole. I also made its roses red to match it with block 3 so that it's not the only block with red roses, and also because I thought the red roses and blue sky would look lovely together. Okay, so I realized that I'm gonna need proper light to really see the colors. We're in the home stretch. This is what they look like so far. I would say they're like 90% done. This one's also gonna be pinks and whites as well, I think. So what we're gonna do is tomorrow I'm going to bring all of this upstairs and I'm going to do it at the table where I can see all the colors better, and I'll be finishing these up. I still have to do, like, there's gonna be roses in the foreground that I actually just remembered. Completely forgot about that. I was supposed to do plants here to cover this bottom section, so I'll do that in the morning. And then for the rest of these, it's just shadowing over top, adding the highlights, making sure the colors are all good, and then I'm gonna paint the edges again, another coat of black, and we'll be signing them, and then they'll be done. I'm hoping to have them done by tomorrow afternoon. My white ink pen was giving me a really hard time when trying to sign the backs of these pieces, but once I finally got it working well enough, they were done and ready for final shots and photos. I love the way this collection turned out. I really wasn't quite sure for a minute there, but the end result was great, and I think my hard work paid off well enough. They're up on my Insta, so feel free to check them out there if you want to see proper pictures and detail shots. If you enjoyed this video, I have a playlist of my previous art videos on my channel that I'll link here for you to check out if you'd like to see more. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next block collection making in the new year.